Every house, every king, and every battle has its own truth. But there are stories older than crowns, darker than the night, and more dangerous than any blade. They were never written in books. They were whispered to fire, to the trees, and to the dead gods. And today, we dare to uncover one of them. The night before the storm was strangely quiet. Driftmark lay beneath a veil of mist, its waves whispering secrets to the rocks, its torches flickering in the sea-born wind. In the great hall of high tide, the young dragon rider Sir Adam Valerion stood before the ancient hearth, watching the flames twist and curl like restless spirits. The glow painted his face in hues of gold and crimson, reflections of the dragon fire that burned within his blood. He was but 5 and 10, lean and dark-haired, with the salt-stained look of the sea in his eyes, a sailor's son raised among princes. Once, he had thought himself lucky beyond measure. To be chosen by a dragon was the highest honor any man could dream of. Sea smoke, silver gray and swift as a gull, had answered his call. Together they soared above ship and shore, a living emblem of Driftmark's might. But tonight, there was no joy in the bond between man and dragon. Whispers had reached high tide, whispers of treachery. "Rhaenyra's counsel grows fearful," said Lord Corlys Velaryon, the sea snake, pacing before the fire. The years had carved sharpness into him, yet his gaze still burned with command. "They say you have grown too bold, Adam, that you and Sea Smoke might turn coat, as others have done." Adam turned sharply, disbelief flickering across his face. "Turn coat? Against the Queen? Never." "They said the same of Ulf White and Hugh Hammer," the sea snake replied grimly. "They were dragon seeds too, low-born men raised high. Now they plot to sell their swords to Aegon the usurper. The court trusts no one of your kind." Adam clenched his fists. "And you, my lord, do you mistrust me as well?" Corlys's eyes softened. "You are my blood, Adam, but war turns even blood to ash. Remember that." Outside, the wind howled, and far across the mist-drenched cliffs came a sound like thunder. Sea Smoke's roar, echoing from his lair above the sea. The dragon felt his rider's unease, his restlessness. It was said dragons shared the hearts of their riders. And this night, both hearts were troubled. In the morning, Adam would ride to Dragonstone, to stand before Queen Rhaenyra herself and answer the accusations laid against him. He would speak the truth and clear his name. But beneath that resolve was a gnawing dread, not for himself, but for what the realm had become. The dance of the dragons, they called it. But there was no grace in this dance, no rhythm of beauty or art, only death and ruin, and the thunder of wings over burning fields. As dawn broke, Adam left Driftmark behind. The air above the sea was cold, and the clouds hung heavy with storm. Sea Smoke soared through them like a phantom, his wings flashing silver when the light broke through. Below, black waves rolled endlessly, swallowing the horizon. When Dragonstone came into view, it rose like a shadow from the depths. Towers shaped like claws and spires that curved like horns, all wreathed in smoke. The very stones seemed alive, pulsing with the heartbeat of dragons. At the landing yard, Adam dismounted and was met by the Queen's guards, grim men in black and red, their faces hidden by steel. None spoke to him. They led him through torchlit halls to the great chamber of the painted table. There sat Queen Rhaenyra Targaryen, her crown set upon pale silver hair. Her eyes were tired, not weak but weary, the weariness of one who has fought too long and bled too much. To her right stood Sir Harwin Strong's bastard sons, Jace and Luke's friends once, and to her left, the lords of her dwindling council. "Sir Adam Valerian," she said, her voice cool and distant. "They tell me you have been seen speaking with riders loyal to the usurper, that you plan to fly Sea Smoke to Tumbleton and bend the knee to Aegon." Adam dropped to one knee, his voice steady, though his heart pounded. "My queen, I swear before gods and men that I am no traitor. I would sooner die than raise blade or flame against you." A murmur rippled through the chamber. One lord, a sharp-eyed man in a crimson cloak, stepped forward. "He lies," said Sir Giles Belgrave. "The dragon seeds are faithless. We should strike before he strikes us." Rhaenyra's gaze shifted to Corlys, who had followed in silence. "He is your kin, Lord of the Tides. What say you?" Corlys hesitated, only a heartbeat, but long enough for the queen to see it. "He is loyal," he said at last. "Let him prove it in battle. The foes gather at Tumbleton. Let him ride there in my name." The queen studied Adam's face. "So be it," she said finally. "Fly to Tumbleton. Burn the traitors who would betray me. And if you do not return—" Her eyes turned to ice. "Then I shall know where your loyalties lie." Adam bowed low, though his throat was tight with anger. He knew what this was, not mercy, but suspicion masked as command. Yet he would obey. When he left the chamber, he paused in the hall and looked back once. The queen sat unmoving, like a statue of silver and flame, surrounded by lords who whispered of treason and doom. He thought then of the words his uncle had spoken. War turns even blood to ash. As he stepped into the storm once more, Sea Smoke's wings unfurled, glimmering like wet steel in the rain. Lightning split the sky above Dragonstone, and Adam felt the pull of destiny, sharp, relentless, and cruel. He would fly to war, and whatever awaited him there would decide more than his fate alone. It would decide the fate of dragons. Rain lashed against the sea as Sir Adam Valerian soared through the storm. Lightning flared, and in each flash he glimpsed the restless waves below. Black, foaming, hungry. Sea Smoke roared defiantly, his silver-gray scales shimmering with water, wings cutting through the tempest like blades. The dragon's strength steadied Adam's heart, yet the words of the queen still echoed in his mind. "If you do not return, I shall know where your loyalties lie." They rode through thunder and cloud until dawn's pale light bled across the horizon. Ahead, the riverland stretched vast and sodden, fields drowned beneath weeks of rain. In every village smoke rose, the marks of war, burnt farms, broken bridges, and bodies left for the crows. The land was dying, bled dry by dragonfire and the greed of men. At last, Tumbleton came into sight, a river town once fair and green, now swollen with tents and banners. From above, Adam saw the scars of siege, shattered walls, burnt towers, and hundreds of campfires burning on the hills beyond. There, two great beasts slept amid the ruins, dragons vast as castles, their wings folded like mountains of shadow, Vermithor and Silverwing. Adam's breath caught, the dragons of betrayal. Those mighty creatures now obeyed no queen. Their riders, Hugh Hammer and Ulf White, low-born men raised to glory by Rhaenyra's cause, had turned against her and joined the Greens. For gold, for wine, for crowns they could never wear. It was said Hugh styled himself King of the Reach, and Ulf demanded the title King of the Hill. Fools both, yet fools with dragons. Adam guided Sea Smoke higher, circling the sky. His orders were clear: strike at the traitors, burn their camp, avenge the queen's name. Yet as he looked upon the fields below, he saw not enemies but chaos. Soldiers of both sides scattered in confusion. Banners of green and black mingled in the mud. The battle had not yet begun, but the storm of it was near. He landed upon a rise overlooking the town and was met by Sir Darren's scouts, weary men in green cloaks. They raised spears at first, mistaking him for an enemy. Only when sea smoke hissed and spread his wings did they fall to their knees in fear. "I come for the traitors," Adam said, his voice cold as the rain. "Tell your lord that sea smoke flies for the queen." The men fled to carry word, leaving Adam alone upon the hill. He dismounted and pressed a hand to Sea Smoke's flank. The dragon rumbled low, restless. He could smell the others, the scent of kin and rival alike. Dragons were not meant to gather so closely. Too much fire in one sky brought only death. Distant horns blared. The battle was beginning. Down the valley rode the hosts of the Greens, banners of Hightower and Lannister, gleaming beneath the gray morning. Opposite them, what remained of Rhaenyra's loyalists formed a ragged line. Adam could see the disarray even from afar. Men quarreled over command. Some turned their coats before the fight was joined. The dance had become madness, a war of dragons fought by liars and cowards, and among them, Adam alone knew what must be done. He climbed back into Sea Smoke's saddle. "Fly," he whispered. "Fly, my friend, for honor." With a cry that split the sky, Sea Smoke took wing. The dragon rose through the rain and smoke, faster than wind, and swooped low over the field. Arrows hissed upward, glancing off his silver scales. Below, men shouted and scattered as dragonfire fell among them, white-hot flame that devoured all. Adam saw Vermithor stir in the distance, the bronze fury of King Jaehaerys' old mount. The great beast lifted his head, eyes like molten gold. Beside him rose Silverwing, once ridden by good Queen Alysanne, now tamed by a drunken sellsword. The sight filled Adam with both awe and rage. These dragons were born of royal fire, yet now served faithless men. He guided Sea Smoke toward them, heart hammering. "Traitors!" he shouted into the wind. "For Rhaenyra and the blood of the dragon!" Vermithor roared in answer, not in words, but in fury. Flame burst from his maw, a torrent of bronze light that filled the heavens. Sea Smoke dodged aside, rolling through the air, the heat searing Adam's cloak. He felt the rush of death pass by and smelled burnt leather. Then Sea Smoke answered in kind, spitting pale fire that streaked across the clouds. The two dragons collided with a sound like thunder. Claws raked against scales. Wings beat in furious rhythm. The sky became a storm of teeth and flame. Below, men watched in terror as dragons warred overhead, their roars drowning the cries of battle. Silverwing rose to join the fray, her silver scales flashing through smoke. 3 dragons now, twisting, clawing, shrieking, and among them, Adam fought for his life. Sea Smoke was smaller but swifter. He darted between the larger beasts, slashing at wings and necks. A claw tore across his flank, spraying blood like molten rain. Adam clung to the saddle, gripping the reins with bleeding hands. He saw Hugh hammer atop Vermithor, his face blackened by soot, his eyes wide with madness. "Yield, boy," Hugh roared. "Your queen is lost, and you will burn with her." Adam drew his sword. "Then I burn as a dragon should." He spurred Sea Smoke forward. The dragons crashed together once more, a tangle of wings and fire. Adam's blade flashed as he struck at Hugh. The blow missed, yet the spark it cast caught the man's cloak aflame. Hugh screamed, flailing, and in that moment, Vermithor turned upon his own rider, maddened by pain and confusion. The great beast's jaws closed, and Hugh Hammer was gone. but victory came with ruin. Vermithor, wounded and enraged, fell upon Sea Smoke. The two dragons grappled, plunging downward in a spiral of fire. Adam felt the world spin, sky, earth, and flame becoming one. "Hold!" he gasped, but Sea Smoke's strength was failing. Blood and smoke filled the air. They struck the ground beyond Tumbleton in a shattering explosion of fire and stone. The earth trembled. Men fled screaming. When the flames died, all that remained was ruin. Wings torn, bones shattered, and the stench of burning flesh. Yet, even in death, Sea Smoke's eyes glowed faintly, loyal, defiant. Adam Valerian lay beside his dragon, his armor blackened, his breath shallow. He could hear the battle fading, the roars of dragons replaced by the weeping of men. Somewhere beyond the smoke, Silverwing circled, keening mournfully before vanishing into cloud. As darkness crept in, Adam thought of Driftmark, of his uncle's warning, of the Queen's cold gaze, of the home he would never see again. He reached out a trembling hand to touch Sea Smoke's snout. "Rest now," he whispered. "We kept our faith." Then the wind carried them both into silence, and with their passing the field of Tumbleton fell still. For on that day, though the war raged on, the dance itself had changed. The age of dragons, bright, terrible, and proud, had reached its point of no return. When word of Tumbleton's ruin reached Dragonstone, it came with smoke and silence. The couriers who brought the tidings could not speak without trembling. They had seen dragons die, and men devoured by their own fire. Vermithor, the bronze fury, was gone. Sea Smoke, the swift silver of Driftmark, lay broken in the ashes, and Sir Adam Valerian, the Queen's last true dragon seed, was lost with him. In the council chamber, Queen Rhaenyra listened without a word. Her face was pale as carved marble, her eyes dark and hollow. Once she had been radiant, the realm's delight, but now her beauty was a ghost. The long war had stripped her of laughter, of trust, of peace. Each victory turned to ash, each ally to dust. "Adam fought for you, my queen," said Lord Corlys, his voice roughened with grief. "He died defending your cause. Remember that, I beg you." Rhaenyra's hands clenched upon the painted table, the vast map of Westeros beneath her fingers. "He was accused of treason," she said softly, "and I sent him to prove his loyalty in battle. He proved it," Corlys said. "He burned for you." For a long moment, there was silence, save for the crackle of the torches. Then the Queen turned her gaze toward the window, where the sea wind moaned through the stones. "Then the fault was mine," she murmured, "and I shall carry it to the Stranger's Gate." Outside, Dragonstone trembled with the cries of restless dragons. With every death at Tumbleton, the surviving beasts had grown uneasy. Cyrax, Meleys, Tyraxes, and the others sensed the loss of their kin. Dragons were creatures of magic, born of old Valyria's fire, and their hearts were bound to one another in ways no Meister could explain. Now, that bond was fraying. As the days passed, the Queen's rule grew brittle. Her council quarreled over blame. Some cursed the dragon seeds, others the sea snake's pride, and still others whispered that perhaps the gods themselves had turned from House Targaryen. Only Lord Corlys remained steadfast. He buried his grief in duty, walking the halls like a man carved of salt and sorrow. Each night he went to the cliffs of Dragonstone to watch the horizon, as though expecting to see Sea Smoke return. But the sea gave back no dragons. It was on one such night that a rider came from the north, mud-stained and half-frozen, bearing a raven's mark. The man was brought before the Queen, his message sealed in wax black as pitch. "From Lord Cregan Stark of Winterfell, he said, bowing low. "He offers terms of alliance, my queen, if you will have the North for your cause." At those words, a murmur rippled through the hall. The North had long stood apart, cold and distant from the quarrels of southern kings. Yet now, in the deepening chaos, even Winterfell stirred. Rhaenyra broke the seal and read. The letter was brief, its words plain and iron-bound. "The North remembers. Send me truth, and I will send you swords." For the first time in many moons, something like hope flickered in her eyes. "If the North will rise," she said, "then we are not yet undone." But the council was divided. Sir Luther Largent urged her to seize the chance, to send envoys at once. Others, weary of treachery, warned her not to trust distant lords. Corlys said nothing until all others had spoken. Then he stepped forward, his sea-gray eyes fixed on hers. "My queen, I have lost sons, grandsons, dragons, and hope itself in your cause," he said. "Yet if there is one thing I have learned from the sea, it is this. When the tide turns, you do not fight it. You ride it, or you drown." Rhaenyra looked upon him long. "Then you would have me ride North's tide?" "I would have you survive it," Corlys said. So it was decided. A ship would sail for the North, bearing the Queen's envoy and her plea for aid. But Rhaenyra herself would not go. Her realm was too fragile, her throne too besieged. Instead, she sent Sir Alfred Broom, a man known for cunning, though not for kindness, to bear her words to Winterfell. As the ship departed under gray skies, the Queen climbed to the highest tower and watched it dwindle into mist. The wind whipped her hair, and she thought of Adam Valerian once more, a boy she had doubted, who had died for her without hesitation. "Would that I had 100 like him," she whispered. Below, the dragons stirred uneasily. Their keepers struggled to calm them, but the beasts grew wild, snapping at chains, spitting fire into the dark. It was said that dragons were bound to their riders not only by blood, but by trust. And now, with their riders dying one by one, that bond was unraveling. In the nights that followed, strange omens spread through Dragonstone. Fishermen spoke of seeing shadows beneath the sea, vast shapes gliding just below the waves. The skies were said to glow faintly red before dawn, as though the sun itself burned with anger. Even the Queen began to dream of fire. In one dream, she stood upon a field of ash, surrounded by the bones of dragons. A great shadow loomed over her, wings vast as night, and a voice whispered, "This is your crown." When she awoke, her pillow was wet with tears. The war ground on. In the west, towns burned. In the east, the high towers pressed their siege upon King's Landing. And in the south, men still fought beneath the walls of Tumbleton, though there was nothing left to win. Yet even as the realm bled, the Queen began to gather strength again. A fleet from the Vale answered her summons. Houses Celtigar and Bar Emmon sent what men they could, and from the Trident came a small host under a banner of silver trout, the last of the river lords loyal to her cause. Still, the realm was broken, and in the wreckage, new ambitions stirred. For not all who fought beneath Rhaenyra's banner did so for her sake. Some sought only power. Among them was Sir Alfred Broom, her envoy, whose ship never reached the north. Instead, he turned his sails toward the narrow sea, seeking coin and favor from Rhaenyra's enemies. When word of his betrayal reached Dragonstone weeks later, the Queen's hope turned to fury. "Even now," she said, "they sell their honor for silver." Corlys could offer no comfort. This is what the dance has wrought. Fire breeds fire. And so, as winter crept upon the land, Rhaenyra stood once more before the painted table. Her hand hovered over the rivers and mountains, the shattered borders of a realm she had once dreamed to rule in peace. Now she saw only ash and blood. But within that ruin, a glimmer remained, the memory of those who had not faltered. Adam, who died for duty. Jace, who perished for love. Lucerys, lost to storm and sea. The queen straightened her back and whispered to the shadows, "I will not yield, not while one dragon lives." Outside, thunder rumbled over Dragonstone, and the dragons roared in answer. Their cries rolled across the night, fierce and mournful, echoing through the cliffs like the song of dying gods. It was a song of warning, for though the queen still ruled from her smoldering throne, the tide of war had already turned, and soon another storm would break. The kind no man nor dragon could master. The winter wind swept through Dragonstone like a living thing, whistling through the cracks of old stone and rattling the torches in their iron sconces. It carried with it the scent of salt, smoke, and something deeper, the restless breath of dragons. The castle itself seemed to tremble, its towers shivering beneath the gray sky, as if the island knew that a greater storm was coming. Queen Rhaenyra Targaryen had not slept for 3 nights. Shadows clung to her like a second cloak as she stood upon the battlements, gazing eastward toward the mist-veiled sea. Each wave that broke upon the cliffs below seemed to echo the words she had been told again and again by her maesters. The realm is breaking. Every raven that came to Dragonstone bore ill news. In the Reach, the Greens had seized Old Town again, their armies swelling with fresh levies from the Hightowers and the Redwynes. In the West, Lord Lannister fortified his holds and refused all summons. And in King's Landing itself, her enemies still ruled, a usurper upon her father's throne, his banners bright above the Red Keep while her own burned in the streets. She had won dragons, but lost the realm. And yet, despite all this, she could not bring herself to despair. There was still strength in her, hard, cold, and unyielding as iron. The queen who had buried sons and dragons both was no longer the girl who had once smiled at courtly songs. She was forged now by grief and flame. Lord Corlys Velaryon came to her that morning, his cloak drawn tight against the chill. The years had bent his back, but not his will. The old sea snake's gaze was still sharp as a blade. "My queen," he said quietly, "the storm grows nearer. Our scouts from the narrow sea report ships bearing the banners of Old Town. The Greens mean to strike at Dragonstone itself." Rhaenyra did not flinch. "Let them come. If they wish to take the dragon's seat, they must walk through fire." "They will not walk," Corlys said grimly. "They will sail with flame and steel. The Hightower fleet outnumbers ours 5 to 1. We cannot meet them at sea. Then we shall meet them in the air." The old lord hesitated. "Our dragons are restless, my queen. Their riders fewer than before. Even Meleys grows wild without her mistress." Rhaenyra's lips tightened. "Then I shall ride her myself." At that, Corlys bowed his head, not in submission, but in sorrow. "You have your mother's courage," he said, "and your father's fire, but fire too consumes." The queen turned away, her silver hair whipping in the wind. "So be it. If I burn, as a dragon should." That night the castle was a hive of motion. The clang of iron boots echoed in the halls. The stables roared with the fury of beasts. The dragon keepers moved swiftly through the gloom, chains clanking as they prepared the mounts for battle. In the yard, men-at-arms whetted their blades beneath torches that sputtered in the sea wind. When dawn came, the world was drowned in fog. The sea below churned with unseen menace, and from that mist rose the faint creak of masts and the rhythmic beat of oars. "The Hightower fleet," said Sir Harwin Rivers, a grim-faced knight loyal to Driftmark. "They are upon us." The horns of Dragonstone sounded, deep, mournful blasts that rolled across the island like thunder. Rhaenyra stood before her dragon, Meleys, the Red Queen, fierce and beautiful, her scales shining with the hue of garnets. Once, the dragon had been ridden by Princess Rhaenys, the queen's cousin, the queen who never was. Now she answered to Rhaenyra alone. The dragon's eyes glowed like molten gold as Rhaenyra approached. "Do you remember her?" the queen whispered softly. "She who rode you first? She fell for me, for my claim, and for this cursed crown. Now it is our turn, old girl." Meleys lowered her head, and Rhaenyra climbed into the saddle. At her command, the dragon unfurled her vast wings, sending gusts of wind through the yard. The ground shook as she leapt skyward, breaking through the fog in a burst of crimson flame. From above, the queen saw the fleet, black ships bearing the Star of the Faith and the Tower of Old Town, dozens of them, their sails swelling with wind. The sight might have broken a lesser heart, but Rhaenyra only leaned forward, eyes narrow with fury. "Burn them all," she whispered. Meleys roared and plunged into the storm. Fire bloomed upon the sea. The first pass tore through the lead ship, splitting its mast like a matchstick. The second set ablaze 3 more. Arrows whistled upward, but they bounced harmlessly off Meleys' scarlet scales. The queen could smell burning pitch and flesh, hear the screams of men below, distant, faint, like echoes from another world. Below her, the Hightower fleet was chaos, ships crashing into one another, their sails aflame, the sea itself turned to molten gold beneath the dawn. Yet even in their panic, they fought back. Great scorpions loosed their bolts into the sky, and one found its mark. The shaft pierced Meleys beneath the wing. The dragon screamed, the sound shattering the clouds, and lurched violently. Rhaenyra clung to the saddle, her world spinning as the beast faltered. Another bolt struck, this time in the neck. Blood like liquid fire poured from the wound, hissing as it hit the sea. "Meleys!" Rhaenyra cried. "Fly higher! Higher!" But the dragon's wings faltered. With a final shriek of rage, the Red Queen descended in fury, diving toward the heart of the enemy fleet. Fire met water in an explosion that shook the sea. The shockwave rolled across the waves, toppling masts and capsizing ships. When the smoke cleared, the Hightower flagship was gone, and so was Meleys. Hours later, wreckage washed ashore upon Dragonstone. Charred timbers, broken oars, and among them a single figure, a woman with silver hair, her armor blackened, her crown half melted by flame. Rhaenyra lived, barely. She was carried to her chambers, her body burned, her spirit fevered. For days she hovered between life and death, muttering of dragons and shadows. Some said she saw visions in her delirium, of her father's ghost, of Valeria's fall, of the Iron Throne itself twisting like molten steel. When she woke, her eyes were different. Gone was the softness that once lingered there, replaced by something sharp, like glass. Corlys came to her bedside and bowed low. "The fleet is broken, my queen. We are safe, for now." "Safe?" Rhaenyra murmured, voice raw as gravel. "No, my lord. There is no safety left, only vengeance." And thus began the queen's final campaign, born not of hope, but of wrath. Outside, the skies above Dragonstone grew darker with each passing day. The dragons screamed through the night, restless and wild, their fire reflecting upon the sea. The war that had devoured sons and cities alike was not yet done, but all who beheld her in those days, pale, scarred, and unbroken, whispered the same words in secret. The queen has become her dragon. The days that followed the burning of the Hightower fleet were dark and heavy with silence. Smoke still rose from the eastern sea, twisting like black ribbons into the sky. The people of Dragonstone whispered that the waves themselves had turned red, and that the screams of the dying still echoed beneath the surf. The maesters wrote that a storm had passed, but those who lived upon the island knew better. It was not the storm that passed, it was peace. Rhaenyra Targaryen lived, but she was changed. The fire that had nearly devoured her seemed to burn now behind her eyes. Her hair, once bright silver, had turned almost white from the smoke and heat. Her skin bore the faint trace of the dragon's flame. She moved through the halls like a specter, not broken, but reborn into something more terrible. When she rose from her sickbed at last, the court fell silent. Even Lord Corlys Velaryon, steadfast and proud, bowed low without meeting her gaze. "My queen," he said, voice low, "you have faced death and conquered it. The gods have spared you for purpose." Rhaenyra looked past him toward the sea. "The gods are deaf, my lord. I am spared for vengeance, not grace." "And vengeance," she pursued. The council convened in the hall beneath the painted table, its map of Westeros scarred by 1,000 planning fingers. The old wood smelled of oil and ash. Around it stood the last loyal lords of her cause, weary, gray, and too few. Rhaenyra did not sit. She stood at the table's head, her shadow falling across the realm itself. "The high towers bleed," she said, her voice cold and clear. "But the usurper still sits the Iron Throne. We will take what remains of our dragons and strike at the heart of his power. King's Landing will burn before another moon's turn." Sir Harwin Rivers shifted uneasily. "My queen, our strength wanes. We have 3 dragons still fit for battle, Syrax, Tyraxes, and Morning, yet few riders to command them. If we fail..." "If we fail," Rhaenyra cut him off, "then we shall fail as Targaryens, with fire in our blood and the world burning beneath our wings." Her gaze fell upon Corlys. "You spoke once of tides, my lord, that we must ride them or drown. Tell me, has the tide turned?" The sea snake's face was grave. "Aye, my queen, but the tide that rises now is red." "Then let it rise." And so the preparations began. The dragons were made ready. Their keepers fed them on cattle and sheep until the very air above Dragonstone shimmered with heat. Blacksmiths worked day and night forging armor, while ravens flew to rally the last of her sworn houses. Rhaenyra herself spent her nights in the dragon pit, walking among the beasts. They watched her with eyes like suns, recognizing in her the fire that mirrored their own. Syrax, her dragon, grew restless, eager for flight. She would feed from no hand but the queen's. Yet even amid the warlike stirrings, there were omens, dark and unshakable. The night before the fleet was to sail, the sky turned red from horizon to horizon. Some said it was the light of the burning ships reflected in the clouds. Others swore they saw the shadow of a great dragon passing across the moon. In the morning, Rhaenyra donned her armor, black steel chased with red, the sigil of the 3-headed dragon upon her breast. She looked every inch a queen of flame and fury. "Send word to the captains," she commanded. "We sail for Blackwater Bay. I will take back my father's throne." The voyage was swift but uneasy. The sea was choked with wreckage from the earlier battle, and the men whispered that the spirits of the drowned reached up from beneath the waves to drag the living down. At night, the dragons circled above the fleet, their roars rolling across the dark waters like thunder. When at last the black cliffs of King's Landing came into view, a hush fell over every deck. Smoke drifted above the city, not from war, but from the hearths of 1,000,000 souls who believed themselves safe. The red keep gleamed upon Aegon's hill, cruel and proud. Rhaenyra stood at the prow of her ship, her hair whipping in the wind. "There lies my birthright," she said, "and the heart of all this sorrow." That night, the attack began. Syrax took to the sky with a roar that shook the towers of the city. The first sweep set the outer walls aflame. The second drove the small folk screaming into the streets. Rhaenyra's loyalists stormed the gates from the riverside while her dragons rained fire upon the ramparts. But inside the Red Keep, betrayal waited. Sir Alfred Broom, the envoy who had once fled with her trust, had already sold his allegiance to the Greens. He opened the gates from within, letting Aegon's knights pour forth. The battle raged through the city's heart. Fire devoured the fish market, the septs, the inns. The cries of children mingled with the clash of steel and the thunder of wings. The air was thick with ash, the sky a storm of red and black. Rhaenyra herself led the charge through the streets astride Syrax, her armor gleaming with flame. Every man who dared lift a sword against her was turned to ash. For a moment, a single terrible moment, it seemed the city itself might bow to her. Then came the sound, a roar greater than thunder. From the direction of the dragon pit, a vast shadow rose. Sunfire, Aegon's golden beast, still lived. His wings were tattered, his body scarred, but his fire was death itself. Upon his back rode the usurper king. Brother faced sister above the burning city. They circled once, twice, their dragons shrieking in challenge. Fire met fire in the skies above the Red Keep. The blast lit the city brighter than dawn, melting stone and iron alike. Syrax darted beneath the golden flame, striking fast, tearing at Sunfire's wing. The two beasts locked in furious embrace, plunging downward through smoke and ruin. They struck the courtyard of the dragon pit with an explosion that shattered towers and sent stones flying like hail. When the dust cleared, both dragons lay broken. Syrax bleeding from a dozen wounds, Sunfire's wings twisted and torn. Yet it was not the dragons who rose first, but their riders. Rhaenyra staggered to her feet, her sword drawn, her crown lost amid the rubble. Aegon faced her, his golden armor blackened with soot. "Sister," he said, voice hoarse, "will you not yield? Look around you. There is nothing left to rule." Rhaenyra raised her sword. "Then I shall rule the ashes." They fought among the ruins of dragons. Steel rang against steel. Sparks flew. Blood spattered the stones. They were evenly matched. Both wounded, both driven by pride, but fate favored neither. As they struggled, Syrax gave one final, anguished roar, and her dying breath of fire engulfed them both. When it faded, the courtyard was silent, save for the crackle of embers. Those who dared approach later found no living Targaryen upon that field, only the mingled bones of dragons and the faint scent of smoke that would never fade from the stones. And so it was said that on that night, in the heart of King's Landing, fire devoured fire, and the dance of the dragons reached its dreadful crescendo. But though the flames had quieted, their echo would haunt the realm for generations. For every man who looked upon the blackened ruins of the dragon pit swore they could still hear, carried on the wind, the last cry of a dragon and the whisper of a queen who would not yield. Morning crept slowly across the charred hills surrounding King's Landing. The smoke had not yet cleared, and the city still glowed with the faint ember light of ruin. Ash drifted through the air like snow, settling upon broken stones, melted iron, and the blackened bones of dragons. The war had reached its dreadful crescendo, yet the cries of the dying had not ceased. Within the ruins of the dragon pit, the air was thick with heat and silence. The The vast dome that had once held the mightiest creatures in the world lay in pieces, its arches torn down by fire and fury. Beneath those fallen stones, the last battle between Rhaenyra and Aegon had burned itself out. When the smoke lifted at last, no living soul could say which had perished first, the sister or the brother. Some swore they saw Rhaenyra's silver hair glimmering amidst the ashes before the wind carried it away. Others whispered that Aegon, half blind and broken, had been dragged from the wreckage by his men. Yet even those who claimed to have seen him afterward spoke of a ghost, not a king. By the third day, the Red Keep stood half abandoned. What remained of the royal guard had fled or fallen to quarrels among themselves. The small folk scavenged in the streets, picking through the wreckage for bread or trinkets of gold. The air smelled of smoke and grief. In the harbor, ships burned quietly, their masts sinking one by one into the murky water. Ravens wheeled above, black shadows against a blood-red dawn. The city that had been the jewel of the Seven Kingdoms was now a tomb. Far to the east, upon the storm-tossed island of Dragonstone, Lord Corlys Velaryon stood upon the cliffs, staring into the sea. He had sent no word, yet in his heart he knew. The queen was gone. The tide had taken her, as it took all things. "Seven forgive her," murmured his wife, Princess Baela, her voice trembling in the wind. She stood beside him, wrapped in a dark cloak, her face pale as moonlight. She fought for her birthright and lost all. Is this what fire and blood have brought us? Corlys did not answer. His gaze remained upon the horizon, where the waves rolled endlessly. "The sea endures," he said at last. "The dragons do not." Behind them, the keep was near empty. The dragon keepers who had once filled its caverns were gone. Some fled, others slain by their own charges. Only the youngest dragons remained, small and half-wild, their cries echoing through the mountain. They were motherless creatures now, unbound and untamed. Baela shivered at the sound. "They mourn her," she whispered. "They know." Corlys turned away from the sea. "Aye, and so should we." That night, a cold rain swept across the island. It hissed upon the coals in the hearths and drummed against the walls like the beating of 1,000 small fists. The sea snake sat in silence, a goblet of wine untouched before him. Around him, the hall was quiet save for the murmurs of servants and the distant roar of the storm. When dawn came again, he gathered his strength and called what remained of the council. There were few left to answer. Old maesters, weary knights, and one boy scarcely of age, Alan of Hull, who had once been Adam's squire, and now stood before the sea snake with eyes full of fire. "Tell us what remains of the queen's cause," Corlys said. Alan spoke with the blunt courage of youth. "Her banners still fly in the vale and in the north. The river lords send word that they will not yield to the Greens. But here, my lord, the people starve. The dragons are dying. The war has broken the realm in two." Corlys nodded slowly. "Then we shall mend it, if we can." He rose, his old strength returning for a moment, and placed a hand upon Alan's shoulder. "Your brother died with honor. He rode where others fled. You will do the same, but not with sword or fire. The realm has had its fill of dragons. It needs men again." Alan met his gaze. "And if the realm no longer remembers what honor is, then we remind it," Corlys said softly, "even if we must begin alone." Thus it was that the sea snake sent his ships once more across the narrow sea, not for conquest, but for peace. Ravens flew to every corner of the realm, bearing his seal and his plea, "The war is done. Let the dead rest." Yet in the ashes of King's Landing, peace was not so easily born. There, amidst the ruins of the Red Keep, Sir Tywin Lannister emerged from hiding. His hair was singed, his cloak torn, but his cunning remained unburned. With the aid of surviving lords, he began to rebuild the court in Aegon's name. The Iron Throne still stood, blackened, twisted, half melted by dragon fire, but to him it was enough. "Let the people see that the crown endures," he said. "A broken throne is still a throne." So the bells of the city tolled once more, not for the dead, but for a hollow peace. The streets were swept, the corpses buried, and from the shattered dragon pit rose a new decree. The dragons are no more. Their bones were gathered and carted away, their skulls set in the hall of the Red Keep as trophies of warning. The age of dragons had ended, but on the nights when the wind blew from the east, the small folk swore they could still hear them, low, distant cries rolling across the bay. Some said it was only the wind, others that the ghosts of the beasts lingered, unable to find rest, while the blood of their riders yet stained the stones. And in those same nights, strange fires were seen upon Dragonstone. Fishermen told tales of wings gleaming above the sea, of shadows moving through the mist. None dared draw near. One such night, Corlys Velaryon climbed alone to the highest cliff. The moon was full, the sea restless. In the distance, lightning flashed, and for the briefest moment he thought he saw her. Rhaenyra, pale and fierce, standing upon the waves as if unburned, her hair whipped in the wind, her eyes bright as dragonfire. But when he blinked, she was gone. "Farewell, my queen," he whispered. "Your dance is done." Below, a sound answered him, not thunder, not wind, but a single haunting roar from deep within the mountain. The last of the dragons stirred. It was a small thing, scarcely larger than a horse, but its wings unfurled with terrible grace. Its scales shimmered in the rain, pale as moonlight. For a heartbeat, the old lord felt the world tremble with memory of fire, of flight, of destiny. Then the creature leapt skyward, vanishing into the storm. Corlys watched until the sky swallowed it whole. A slow, weary smile crossed his face. "So the fire does not die," he murmured. "Not yet." And with that, he turned back toward the keep, knowing the realm would never be as it was, but that somewhere above the clouds, the legacy of dragons still lived, waiting for the world to remember them again. So ended the dance of the dragons, not with triumph, nor with glory, but with silence and shadow. Yet even in ruin their tale endured, whispered from father to son, mother to child, across generations. For though the dragons were gone, their fire lingered, in blood, in memory, and in the hearts of those who dreamed still of wings. And in the long years to come, when the realm knew only peace and forgetfulness, the wise would look upon the blackened stones of the dragon pit and say, "This was where fire devoured fire, and this was where the dragons slept, waiting for the world to call them home." Winter descended slowly upon the realm, as if the gods themselves mourned what had been lost. The skies turned gray, the rivers ran sluggish beneath sheets of ice, and the wind carried with it the ghosts of the dance, whispers of fire and wings that would never soar again. The flames of war had consumed all, kings and queens, dragons and dreamers, leaving behind only cold ash. In the weeks that followed the burning of King's Landing, the realm was like a wounded beast that no Maester could heal. The lords who had fought beneath Rhaenyra's banners sent ravens swearing allegiance to the surviving king, Aegon III, though none called him that yet. To most, he was merely Aegon the Broken, for he had seen his mother devoured before his eyes, and his heart was as hollow as the dragon skulls that now adorned the halls of the Red Keep. The boy was scarcely 11, pale and silent, his hair silver gold, his eyes the color of frozen violets. When the lords gathered to hail him as king, he did not speak. He merely looked down from the iron throne, its melted blades glinting darkly in the torchlight, and nodded once. It was enough. The dance had ended, and the child of the storm had inherited its ruin. Sir Tywin Lannister, ever cunning, served his hand. He ruled where the boy would not, rebuilding the city stone by stone. Yet even he could not banish the shadow that hung over the Red Keep. The court whispered that the young king feared dragons, that he would wake at night crying out as if their fire still burned his flesh. And when the maesters spoke of hatching new eggs, Aegon forbade it. "Let them sleep," he said softly. "The realm has had its fill of dragons." Those words, simple as they were, marked the beginning of a new age, one without wings. But though the dragons were gone, their legacy lingered in every corner of the realm. The riverlands still smoldered. The Reach, once golden and ripe, now lay half-barren. Whole villages had vanished from the maps, their people swallowed by hunger or steel. Even the proud Hightowers, who had once dreamed of ruling beside the Iron Throne, now kept their gates closed, fearful of retribution. On Dragonstone, where the first Targaryens had once raised their banners of conquest, the fires in the dragon pit had gone out. The caverns that had echoed with roars now lay still, heavy with dust and sorrow. Only the youngest of the queen's blood remained there, her granddaughter, Princess Baela, and her husband, Alan of Hull. They ruled not as monarchs, but as wardens of memory, guardians of what little remained. The sea battered their island endlessly, yet within its stone halls a quiet strength endured. Baela often walked the cliffs at dusk, her hair whipping in the salt wind, her eyes scanning the horizon for signs of life. She never spoke of her mother, nor of her queen, but each evening she lit a lantern and left it burning by the shore. "Let her find her way home," she would whisper. "Let them all find their way home." Alan, for his part, devoted himself to the sea. The fleets of Driftmark had been shattered during the dance, but he rebuilt them, one by one. It was said no man alive knew the tides as he did, and some swore the waves obeyed his will. Though young, he bore the gravity of those who had seen too much. He rarely spoke of his brother, Adam, save on the nights when the wind was strong and the sea restless. Then he would climb the highest tower and pour a cup of wine into the waves. "For the dragon who did not betray his blood," he would say. In time, word reached Dragonstone that the boy king had summoned all surviving kin of House Targaryen to court. Reluctantly, Baela and Alan made the journey to King's Landing, bringing with them the relics of their line: old banners, fragments of scale, and a single egg said to have been taken from the ashes of Melees. The city was quieter than they remembered, but not peaceful. The people were wary, their eyes sunken, their spirits broken. Above them, the Red Keep loomed like a wound that had never healed. The smell of smoke still lingered, faint but eternal. Inside, King Aegon received them in the Great Hall. He was smaller than rumor had made him, a boy wrapped in a man's crown, his expression distant. He thanked them for their loyalty, though his voice was barely more than a whisper. When Baela presented the dragon's egg, wrapped in silk the color of blood and shadow, a hush fell over the court. "It has not quickened," she said softly, "but it may yet. Dragons have slept before." The boy's eyes flickered toward the egg. For a long while, he said nothing. Then, with a slow and deliberate motion, he turned his face away. bury it," he said. "Let the world forget what we were." The hall remained silent, save for the sound of the Queen Dowager's sobs. Some lords murmured that the boy's heart was broken beyond mending. Others whispered that he feared what might come if dragons rose again. That night, Byla could not sleep. She stood upon the terrace overlooking the black water, watching the city lights shimmer across the dark waters. The air smelled of ash and rain. Somewhere below, a child was crying, and the sound carried strangely through the mist. Alan joined her, silent for a long while before he spoke. "He's only a boy," he said, "but he wears the grief of all his kin. The blood of dragons runs thin now." Byla's eyes remained upon the horizon. "It will not die," she said. "Blood remembers, even when men do not." In the darkness beyond the city, thunder rumbled, or perhaps it was something else. A faint echo, deep and distant, like the beating of wings. Neither spoke of it, though both heard. When dawn came, the princess and her husband departed the capital. They carried with them the unhatched egg, though the boy king had ordered its burial. As their ship slipped into the fog, Byla held the bundle close, feeling its faint warmth against her chest. "Not yet," she whispered. "Sleep, little one. The world will need you again." Behind them, King's Landing faded into mist, a city built upon ashes, ruled by silence. And though peace returned to the realm, it was a hollow peace, fragile as glass. The dragons were gone, the Targaryens broken, and the songs that had once filled the halls of kings were replaced by whispers of loss. Yet somewhere in the depths of the narrow sea, beneath storm and shadow, a light still burned, faint but living. For fire, once kindled, is not so easily quenched. And so the dance ended not with extinction, but with waiting. The flames that had scorched the realm now slept, dreaming beneath stone and sea, until the day when the world would call upon dragons once more, and the children of fire would rise again to claim the sky. Years passed, and the fires of the dance faded into stories. The children born in its shadow grew up hearing only whispers of the war, tales of dragons screaming above burning castles, of brothers and sisters turned to enemies, of kings and queens devoured by their own flames. But for those who had lived through it, no passage of years could erase the sound of wings or the smell of smoke that clung to memory like a scar. The realm of Westeros was quiet now, too quiet. King Aegon III sat upon the Iron Throne, a crown too heavy for one so young. His rule brought no joy, only endurance. He was called the Dragonbane, though none dared say it to his face. The name was both curse and truth, for under his reign the dragons truly died. One by one, the few that had survived the dance sickened and perished. The keepers swore they did their best, feeding them, tending them, praying over their pale, shrunken forms. But their fire burned weaker with each season. When the last of them died, a small, stunted creature that had never flown, the king ordered its body burned and the ashes scattered to sea. "Let the fire go where it began," he said, his voice barely more than a whisper. The Meisters wrote that dragons were gone from the world forever. The common folk said it was a blessing. The lords said it was peace. But in the hearts of those who still bore Valyrian blood, it was something else entirely, an ending that should never have come. On Dragonstone, where the wind never ceased and the cliffs forever faced the fury of the sea, the line of Valyrian endured. Lord Alan of Hull ruled with wisdom, though sorrow never left his eyes. Beside him, Lady Byla kept her quiet vigil, the last true dragon rider of her house, though her mount had perished long ago. Each year she climbed the highest tower on the island and gazed eastward, where the sea met the dawn. And each year she lit a single brazier, a flame to remember those who had been lost. She never spoke of what she kept hidden in the depths below the castle, the dragon's egg she had carried from King's Landing. She had placed it upon a bed of coals deep within the caverns, tended it in secret for years. Sometimes it pulsed faintly with heat, as if something within still dreamed. When storms came, she would descend alone into the dark and press her hand upon the shell. "Sleep," she would whisper, her voice echoing through the stone. "The world is not ready for you yet." As decades passed, the court of King's Landing forgot her. The Iron Throne changed hands, masters died and were replaced, and still the wind blew over Dragonstone, carrying her prayers into the sea. But one winter, harder than most, the storms grew fierce. The sky above Dragonstone darkened for days at a time, and lightning clawed across the heavens. The sea raged like a living thing, hurling itself upon the cliffs. In the depths of the island, the old stones trembled. Bela was frail by then, her hair as white as the foam on the waves. She knew her time was short, and she felt the call of the deep caverns as she had not in many years. With a single candle and her old cloak about her shoulders, she descended the winding stairs. The air below was warm, almost stifling, and the glow of the coals lit the walls with a red shimmer. There, at the center, lay the egg, black and crimson, veined with faint gold. She knelt beside it, her hand trembling as she touched its surface. "Do you still dream, my little one?" she whispered. "I have grown old, waiting for you." A rumble answered her, soft, distant, but real. The stone beneath her feet quivered, dust falling from the ceiling. For the first time in many years, she felt warmth pulse from within the egg, faint but alive. Bela smiled through her tears. Then perhaps not all fires die. That night, the storm broke. Lightning struck the cliffs above Dragonstone, splitting the rock as thunder rolled like the voice of ancient gods. The waves rose higher than any in memory, crashing against the keep's foundations. When morning came, the servants found the lower caverns collapsed, sealed by stone and flame. Lady Bela was gone. The fires below the island smoldered for days, painting the sky a deep red that could be seen even from the mainland. Rumor spread quickly that she had perished in the storm, that the sea had claimed her. But among the fisherfolk who dwelled upon the eastern shores, another tale took root. They said that on the night the storm broke, they saw a shadow rise from the sea, vast wings unfurling, scales glimmering like molten silver. A dragon, they swore, reborn from the heart of the mountain. No one believed them. The maesters called it folly, the fancy of frightened men. Yet in the months that followed, strange signs appeared. Flocks of gulls vanished from the skies, and sailors spoke of great shadows beneath the waves. On still nights, a low rumble echoed across the water, like the beating of distant wings. Years turned to decades. Kings rose and fell. Castles were built and burned. The memory of the dance became a story told to children, a warning of pride and ruin. The last of those who had lived through it passed into legend. But on Dragonstone, the air was never still. The ground beneath the island remained warm, even in the coldest winter. Fishermen who sailed too close to its shores told of seeing flickers of red light beneath the water. One, a weathered old man from Driftmark, swore he saw it with his own eyes. A creature gliding beneath the surface, vast and terrible, its scales glowing faintly through the dark. "Dragons are gone," his son told him. You saw the reflection of lightning, nothing more." The old man only shook his head. "Lightning doesn't breathe," he said, "and what I saw looked back at me." So the stories returned, as stories always do. Some said the dragon was a ghost, the spirit of Melees come again. Others whispered it was something new, a child of the storm, born from fire long buried. But on the highest tower of Dragonstone, where the wind forever howled, a single lantern still burned, night after night. No one knew who lit it. Some said it was the servants' doing, honoring their lost lady. Others said it burned of its own accord, and when the night was calm and the sea was quiet, those who listened carefully swore they could hear, far off beyond the mist, the faintest echo of a roar, not loud, not fierce, but alive. In that sound, there was promise, a whisper of what had been and what might be again. For though the world had turned from dragons, dragons had not turned from the world. Beneath the stone, beneath the sea, their fire slept still, waiting for a time when the sky would call to them once more, when the blood of men would burn with courage again, and a new dance would begin. And when that day came, the songs of old would stir anew, and the fire of House Targaryen, the fire of the world, would rise once more. The years after the storm were long and heavy with silence. Winter's chill crept deep into the bones of the realm, and the sea around Dragonstone froze in thin, glittering sheets that shattered like glass beneath the oars of passing ships. The island stood apart from the world, brooding, wind-swept, and alone. Few came to its shores now. The lords of Westeros no longer looked eastward with reverence or fear. They had forgotten what it meant to live in the shadow of dragons. The Targaryen name, once sung in awe, now carried with it only sorrow, a bloodline cursed by its own fire. Yet beneath the surface of stone and sea, something still stirred. The warmth in the caverns had never truly died. Fishermen spoke of strange lights dancing beneath the waves, of smoke that sometimes drifted up from the fissures in the cliffs, even in the dead of winter. The Meisters called it the breath of the mountain. The small folk called it something older. They called it the dragon's heart. By the time a new century dawned, the dance of the dragons had faded into near myth. Bards sang of knights and kings, of wars for crowns and thrones, but few sang of Rhaenyra or Aegon anymore. Only the oldest men remembered the war of fire and blood that had split the world in two, and yet fate is not so easily buried. On the far coast of Driftmark, a young sailor named Ren Redtide lived with the salt wind in his hair and the restless heart of the sea in his chest. He was a bastard, born of no house, with no legacy but his own courage. From his earliest days, he had been drawn to Dragonstone, the dark silhouette that haunted the horizon like a sleeping giant. On calm nights, he would watch the island from his boat, the faint light of its watchtowers flickering through the mist. Sometimes, he swore he could hear the island breathe. "Don't stare too long, boy," the old sailors warned him. "Dragonstone's a haunted place. The ghosts of the Targaryens still walk there, and the dragons sleep beneath their feet." But Ren only smiled. "If they sleep, I'd like to see them dream." He was 15 when he first set foot upon the island. The storms that year had driven his ship against the rocks, shattering its hull. Clinging to a piece of wreckage, he was carried by the tide into one of the island's hidden coves. When he woke, he found himself in a place unlike any he had ever seen. The cave walls glimmered faintly, as though veins of fire ran through the stone. Steam rose from cracks in the floor, and the air smelled of earth and salt. Deeper within, he found carvings, old Valyrian runes, half worn by time, and the sigil of the dragon carved again and again upon the walls. Something called to him then, a faint, rhythmic pulse that seemed to come from beneath the ground. It was not sound, not truly, but he felt it in his chest, like the beating of a distant heart. Ren followed it. The path led him downward, through tunnels slick with moss and heat. The deeper he went, the warmer the air grew, until sweat soaked his tunic and steam clouded his vision. And there, in the heart of the mountain, he saw it, a shape that glowed faintly red amid the darkness. An egg. It was vast, larger than a man's head, black as obsidian streaked with veins of crimson light. It rested upon a bed of coals that had burned for 100 years without dying. Ren fell to his knees. Awe and fear warred within him. He reached out, then stopped, trembling. Something within the egg stirred. A whisper brushed against his mind, soft as the sigh of the tide. Words he could not understand, yet felt as surely as breath. He stumbled backward, gasping, the echo of it still ringing in his skull. Then, as suddenly as it had come, the voice was gone. He fled from the caverns and did not stop until he reached the cliffs above. The wind tore at his hair, the sea roared below, and the sky above Dragonstone burned with the colors of the dying sun. When he returned to Driftmark, he spoke of what he had found. None believed him. Dragon eggs? They laughed. Fables, boy. The last of them turned to stone before your grandfather's time. But Ren could not forget what he had seen. The memory haunted his dreams. He would wake in the night, heart pounding, the faint echo of that heartbeat still in his chest. One evening, when the moon was full, he took a small boat and rowed once more to Dragonstone. He carried only a lantern and a dagger, and a strange conviction that the island had called him back. The sea was calm, the wind still. As he stepped ashore, he felt warmth rising from the stones beneath his boots. The pulse was stronger now, steady and deep. The mountain was alive. He descended again into the caverns, the same path he had taken before. But this time, he was not alone. In the glow of his lantern, he saw movement, faint, sinuous shapes slipping between the shadows. Eyes gleamed in the dark, yellow and unblinking. Small dragons. There were 3 of them, no larger than hounds, their scales black and red and silver gray. They hissed at his light, their wings half spread, the air around them shimmering with heat. Ren froze, scarcely daring to breathe. The creatures did not attack. Instead, they circled him slowly, their movements fluid, curious. One lowered its head, sniffing the air near his hand. Its breath was hot as a forge. Then it turned and looked toward the egg. The glow had grown brighter, the crimson veins pulsing like living fire. The sound filled the cavern now, a heartbeat, strong and steady. The dragons hissed and stepped back, their eyes fixed upon it. The egg cracked. A line of golden light split its surface, and from within came a sound that Ren would remember all his life. A cry, fierce and new, the cry of something ancient reborn. Flame burst from the fissures, swirling through the air in wild spirals. Ren shielded his face, the heat searing his skin. When he looked again, the egg had shattered. From its ashes rose a creature the color of the storm, scales pale as dawnlight, eyes glowing like molten gold. It spread its wings, small but strong, and let out a shriek that shook the stones of the mountain. The other dragons bowed their heads. Ren stood in silence, awestruck. In that moment, he understood. The fire had not died. It had waited, watched, chosen. The newborn turned its gaze upon him. For an instant, man and dragon looked into each other's souls. Then, slowly, the creature stepped forward and rested its head against his chest. Ren felt its heartbeat against his own, and the warmth of it filled him like sunlight. He knew then that the age of dragons was not over. It had only been sleeping, and the world, broken and weary though it was, would soon remember what it meant to tremble beneath wings. Above Dragonstone, the clouds broke apart and a single ray of light fell upon the sea. The wind shifted, carrying with it the faint echo of a roar, not of ending, but of beginning. And so, from the ashes of ruin, the fire was born anew. The world beyond Dragonstone did not yet know what had awakened beneath its black cliffs. Across the narrow sea, merchants still spoke of quiet waters and empty skies. In the courts of Westeros, Meisters still taught that dragons were gone forever. Yet on storm nights, when lightning licked the sea and thunder rolled between the isles, fishermen swore they saw fire dancing on the waves. Ren Redtide kept to the caverns where his fate had bound him. The pale hatchling he had found, the storm-colored worm with eyes of gold, grew swiftly. Within months, its wings brushed the cavern roof. He named it Tempest, for it had been born in thunder. The other dragons, small and wild, came to follow its lead, and to Ren, it seemed as if the mountain itself breathed once more. He learned their ways by instinct more than knowledge. The dragons trusted him, and he in turn learned to read their moods. The rumbling growl that meant hunger, the subtle flick of a tail that warned of ire. He fed them on sheep stolen from the coast and fish drawn from the deep sea caves. Sometimes, when he stood too near their fire, his skin blistered, yet he bore the marks with pride. But secrets cannot sleep forever. One autumn eve, as he hunted along the cliffs, he found a ship anchored in the cove below. Its sails were black and silver, the colors of House Valerian. Among the crew stood a woman cloaked in gray, her hair silver white, her eyes sharp as cut steel. "I know this place," she said when he called down. "I was born under its shadow." Ren stared. "You speak as if it were home." "It was," she replied. "I am Area Valerion of Driftmark, granddaughter to those who served Rhaenyra's line. My kin sent me to chart the island's heat vents. The masters claim the mountain cools, but the sea still steams. And you, who are you to wander these cliffs alone?" He hesitated, torn between fear and the truth that weighed upon him like an oath. "I am no one," he said at last. Her gaze lingered. "No one does not burn his hands like that," she said softly, eyes falling to the scars along his arms. "The island marks those who keep its secrets." That night, she found him again, high above the cove. He meant to warn her away, yet her courage matched his own. When he led her into the tunnels, expecting screams or flight, she only stared in silent wonder. The glow of the mountain lit her hair with red fire. "So the stories were true," she whispered. "The blood of the dragon does not die. It hides." Ren said nothing. The cavern's breath filled the silence, deep, warm, alive. Then Tempest emerged from the dark, scales gleaming like moonlit steel. The young dragon regarded her with curious eyes. Instead of fear, she sank to her knees. "By the Seven," she murmured, "the gods have returned the world its fire." After that, she stayed. Together they tended the dragons, guarding their secret as winter yielded to spring. They built pens deeper within the caverns, forged chains and iron rings, though Tempest rarely suffered restraint. The bond between dragon and man grew fierce. Ren could feel its will like a pulse through the air. But word spreads faster than wind. Sailors began to vanish near Dragonstone. Nets returned burned, their ropes charred to cinders. One night, a fishing vessel from Driftmark saw a shape rise from the sea, vast wings beating against the stars. Its roar shattered the stillness, and its fire turned the clouds red. The next morning, half the Isle swore they had seen a dragon in flight. The tales reached King's Landing before the moon was out. At court, Meisters dismissed it as madness, yet the hand of the king did not. He remembered too well what fire could do. Messengers were sent to investigate, soldiers to scour the Isles. When the ships appeared on the horizon, Arya saw their banners first. "They come from the crown," she said. "If they find the dragons, they'll kill them as their grandsires did." Ren looked toward the mountain. "Then they must not find them." They hid the smaller beasts deep in the tunnels, sealing the lower caverns with stone. But Tempest could not be hidden. It sensed the threat before the sails were even close, wings twitching, smoke curling from its nostrils. "They mean to cage you again," Ren said, stroking its neck. The dragon's scales were warm beneath his hand. "But we will not be chained." When the fleet drew near, the storm began, sudden, unnatural, as if summoned by the mountain itself. Lightning tore the sky, striking the lead ship's mast. The sea churned like boiling oil. And then Tempest rose. From the cliffs, it launched into the storm, wings slicing through the rain. Fire burst from its throat, bright as dawn, falling upon the ships below. The sailors screamed, their cries lost to the wind. Arrows hissed upward, useless against the storm's wrath. Arya stood beside Ren on the cliff's edge, her face lit by the firelight. "You've doomed us," she said, yet there was wonder in her eyes. "Or freed us," he answered. The fleet scattered, half consumed by flame, the rest fleeing toward the open sea. Tempest circled once, twice, and then descended, landing upon the cliffs with a thunderous crash. The dragon's eyes gleamed with fierce triumph. But victory carried its own curse. In the days that followed, the king's council declared Dragonstone accursed once more. Gold cloaks were dispatched to hunt the false rider and his beast. Any who aided him were to be hanged. Ren and Arya fled into the mountain. They lived among the dragons, hidden from the world that now feared them. Yet even as they hid, they knew that what had been begun could not be undone. The fire had returned to the blood. Years passed, and the hunters never found them. Storms shielded the island, the sea itself rising to guard its secret. Arya bore a child, a boy with eyes of molten gold and hair pale as dawn. They named him Daenor, though no Meister ever wrote his name. As he grew, the dragons watched over him. It was said he could calm them with a glance, that fire would not burn his skin. Ren taught him the ways of the sea. Arya taught him the history of flame. "Remember," she told him, as they stood before the cavern where Tempest slept. "The world fears what it does not understand. But one day, when darkness rises again, it will call for fire, and you must answer." The boy nodded, solemn and sure. When Ren grew old, he left the caverns for the last time. The wind off the sea was cold, but he felt peace in his heart. Looking east, he saw Tempest soaring above the clouds, its silver wings catching the light of the sun. "Let them think the dragons are gone," he murmured. "Let them sleep easy a while." He died with the sea whispering below and the sky burning above. And beneath Dragonstone, the heartbeat continued, steady, patient, eternal. The age of dragons had not ended. It merely waited for its hour. And when that hour came, when the world once more fell to ruin and the night closed in, the descendants of fire would rise again, from storm, from sea, from shadow, to remind the realm that dragons do not die. They only dream. The boy Daenor grew tall beneath the shadow of Dragonstone's black towers. Though no songs named him prince, though no lord bent knee before his blood, he carried within him the breath of dragons. His mother, Arya Velaryon, had long since turned gray, and his father's bones lay in the cliffs above the sea. Yet the fire in their son's eyes had not dimmed. He learned the ways of the mountain, its tunnels and hidden paths, the secret warmth that pulsed through its veins. The older dragons, Tempest and the wild brood that had hatched after, still roamed the inner caverns. Some had grown vast and perilous, their wings scraping the stone ceilings, their bellies lined with scars. Daenor moved among them without fear. They knew his scent, his voice, and the rhythm of his heartbeat. When he spoke, the dragons listened. "Do they remember the old world?" he once asked his mother, watching Tempest sleep among the bones of her kin. "Dragons remember fire," Arya said. "They do not dwell on what is gone, but we do. That is our burden." He was 17 when she died, taken by a fever that swept the coast. Daenor buried her on the cliffs beside his father and marked the grave with a stone carved with the sigil of House Velaryon, the sea serpent and the dragon entwined. For 3 days he did not speak, and for 3 nights he sat beside the sea, listening to the wind that carried the song of the waves and the distant echo of wings. When he rose at last, his face was different. The softness of youth was gone. In its place burned resolve. He would not let the fire fade. That winter was harsh across Westeros. Crops withered, rivers froze, and famine gnawed at villages from the Reach to the Vale. In the king's court, old men muttered that it was punishment for the sins of their forebears, for the dance of the dragons, for the blood that had turned upon itself. The Meisters called it natural and unremarkable, but the small folk whispered of omens. They said the wind carried the sound of beasts long dead. And one night, above the bay of Blackwater, a shadow crossed the moon. A ship returning from Pentos reported that a silver creature had flown over the sea, trailing sparks in its wake. The captain swore he had seen eyes like molten gold looking down upon him. The tale spread like wildfire. "The dragons return!" cried some, half in terror, half in awe. But the court of King's Landing laughed. "Children's tales," said the hand. "There are no dragons left in this world." Far from the capital, Daenor watched the smoke of his mountain curl into the gray sky. The young dragon Tempest had grown mighty now, her wings vast as sails, her roar shaking the cliffs. When she flew, the waves broke apart beneath her shadow. The small dragons that had once feared the open air now soared beside her. A new flight born of the island's secret fire. He began to train them in earnest. By day, he rode Tempest along the coast, learning the rhythm of the wind, the lean and shift of flight. By night, he fed the younger dragons and studied the old carvings his mother had shown him, Valyrian runes etched into stone. He could not read them fully, but he understood their essence. They were promises written in fire, that dragons and men were one, and that neither would endure without the other. Years passed. Daenor grew into a man of quiet strength, his hair white as frost, his eyes burning like embers. His name spread among the fisherfolk as a rumor. The dragon of the Misty Isle, they called him, half in jest, half in reverence. When their nets came back heavy, or the storms spared their ships, they left offerings along the cliffs. Shells, bits of coral, small coins. In time, the ships of the realm began to circle wider around Dragonstone, steering clear of its coast. No lord sent his banners there. The crown's envoys who came seeking proof never returned. It was during the 4th winter of Daenor's solitude that fate turned its wheel again. A ship wrecked upon the rocks one night, driven by the fury of a gale. From its splintered hull crawled a single survivor. A girl, scarcely older than he had been when he first found the egg. Her hair was dark, her eyes gray as smoke. She bore the marks of high birth, though her silks were torn and soaked with salt. Denner found her on the shore at dawn, clinging to life. "Who are you?" he asked. "Lyra," she whispered, "daughter of Lord Caron of Nightsong. Our ship was bound for King's Landing. Pirates took us." She spoke no more that day, but when strength returned to her, she wandered the halls of Dragonstone like one waking from a dream. She did not flinch at the warmth in the stone or the distant rumble beneath their feet. When she heard the dragons for the first time, she smiled, a small, fierce smile that stirred something long buried in Daenor's chest. "You are not afraid," he said. "How could I be?" she answered. "Fear is for those who have forgotten what they are." Together they tended the dragons. Lyra's courage matched his, and soon the beasts accepted her as they did him. When she touched Tempest's snout, the dragon bowed her head, smoke curling from her nostrils. It was as if the creature recognized a kindred flame. For a year they lived thus, hidden from the world, bound by the secret they shared. Yet secrets are fragile things. Word of lights in the sky and thunder without storm reached the mainland once again. Ships sent to investigate found only wreckage and ash. One returned with a single tale, that a man and woman had been seen upon the cliffs, astride a great silver dragon. The whispers spread. The realm, weary of peace, began to stir. Old lords whispered of prophecy, of blood returning to claim what was lost. Others spoke of fear, that another dance might begin, and that this time the world itself would burn. Danner heard the rumors carried by traitors' tongues. He knew what they meant. "If they come for us," he told Lyra, "we will not hide." The following spring, the royal fleet sailed for Dragonstone, banners high, iron and gold flashing in the sun. They came with orders to take the island and slay whatever beasts remained upon it. When they arrived, the sea was calm, the sky clear. No storm protected the mountain this time. Yet the men who came ashore found not silence, but song. It was low and distant, like the rumble of thunder, but it grew until the very stones trembled beneath their feet. Then the mountain split, and from its heart burst fire, bright, wild, unstoppable. Tempest rose first, wings vast as clouds, her roar shaking the heavens. Behind her came the others, dark shapes gliding from the smoke, their eyes glowing with the light of rebirth. And upon Tempest's back rode Daenor and Lyra, the last of the dragon-blooded, their cloaks streaming like flame. The fleet broke before them. Fire rained from the sky, turning sea to steam and ships to ash. That night, those who survived fled westward, bearing tales of the sky aflame and a new Targaryen reborn from the sea. The Meisters scoffed, yet fear crept back into the hearts of kings. On Dragonstone, Danner looked down upon the blackened waves and the ashes of the fleet. Lyra stood beside him, the wind tangling her hair. "They will never stop," she said. "Then neither will we," he replied. He turned his eyes to the horizon, where dawn began to rise, gilding the clouds in gold. The age of dragons had begun again, and this time the world would remember. The sun rose red over Dragonstone, painting the sea in hues of blood and gold. The island stood wreathed in smoke, the air heavy with the scent of salt and ash. Far below the cliffs, the wreckage of the royal fleet smoldered upon the waves, blackened hulls adrift, masts splintered, their banners nothing but scraps fluttering upon the tide. The wind carried with it the cries of the gulls, and the distant crackle of dying fire. Upon the highest ridge stood Daenor and Lyra, gazing down at the ruin they had wrought. The silver dragon, Tempest, crouched behind them, her great wings folded close, her sides rising and falling with deep, steady breaths. Her scales shimmered like polished steel, glinting with sunlight and flame. "They will come again," Lyra said quietly, her voice lost in the wind. Daenor's eyes were fixed on the horizon, where the faintest shadows of distant sails trembled upon the edge of sight. "Aye," he said, "and next time they will bring fire of their own. Men always do." He looked at her, the woman who had come to him by storm and fate. In her eyes burned courage, the reflection of the dragon's flame. "Let them," he said. "The sea remembers who rules it." That night, the wind rose, and the island trembled. The dragons stirred restlessly within their caverns, their roars echoing through the cliffs like thunder trapped beneath the earth. Daenor walked among them, touching each in turn, sleek Axehead, black as obsidian, proud Silvermist, pale and lean, and Tempest, his bond and his heart. "They hunt us now," he told them, "but the fire is ours. No king, no crown, no master's chain can bind it." The dragon's eyes glowed like molten gold, and for a moment he felt their thoughts brush against his own. Not words, but something deeper, ancient as the world itself. A promise. Lyra joined him as dawn broke, her cloak drawn against the chill. She carried a blade at her hip and the firelight in her gaze. "The wind has turned," she said. "A storm gathers from the east." "Then we ride its wings," Daenor replied. By midday, thunder rolled across the sky. The storm came swift and hard, sweeping over the narrow sea like an army. When its first wave struck the cliffs, Daenor climbed into Tempest's saddle. Lightning danced along the dragon's scales, wreathing her in ghostly light. Lyra mounted Silvermist, her hair whipping in the gale. "Where do we fly?" she shouted above the roar of the wind. "South," Daenor answered, "to remind the realm that dragons are not forgotten." They rose together into the tempest. The sea below churned, waves rearing like beasts. Rain lashed against Daenor's face, but he felt only exhilaration. The storm was alive, its fury matching his own. Lightning split the clouds around them, illuminating Tempest's vast wings, Lyra's pale hair streaming beside him, and the faint gleam of dragons trailing in their wake. When they crossed the Blackwater Bay, the city of King's Landing lay dark beneath the storm. The towers of the Red Keep glistened with rain, the streets a maze of glimmering water and terrified voices. The sight of dragons descending from the heavens sent chaos through the city. Bells rang, soldiers shouted, and the people fell to their knees or fled. Daenor circled above the Red Keep, his eyes narrowing at the twisted shadow of the Iron Throne within. "They built this throne upon the bones of dragons," he said, his voice carried by wind and thunder. "Let them remember what it cost." Lyra's voice rang through the storm. "The realm will call you tyrant." He looked back at her, rain running down his scarred face. "Let them call me what they will. I would rather be feared for fire than forgotten in peace." At his signal, Tempest roared. Flame erupted from her jaws, bright as sunrise, striking the empty towers of the Red Keep. Stone cracked, glass shattered, and the city's night turned to day. Yet even in destruction, Daenor's hand did not waver. He burned not to conquer, but to awaken, to remind the realm of the blood that still ran hot through its veins. When the flames died, the dragons wheeled away into the clouds. Below, King's Landing smoldered, but lived. The message had been sent. By the time the storm cleared, the word had spread. Dragons had returned. the lords of Westeros met in fear and fury. Some called for war, others for alliance. The maesters scoured their dusty tomes, seeking any trace of prophecy. And in the taverns of the small folk, whispers grew that a new king had risen upon Dragonstone, a rider who spoke to dragons as men speak to friends, who commanded fire and storm alike. But Daenor claimed no crown. He and Lyra ruled the island not as monarchs, but as keepers, guardians of the fire that had once shaped the world. Yet as more dragons hatched, as the sky above Dragonstone filled again with wings, the realm could not ignore them. Envoys came, bearing words of peace wrapped in deceit. Priests came declaring the dragons unholy. Sellswords came seeking fortune. None left the island unchanged, and among them came a raven, black, wet with rain, bearing a seal of crimson wax. It was from the north. Daenor broke it open and read, "The realm trembles once more. The dead stir in the cold. If the dragons live again, then so too may the darkness. Come north, rider of storms. The fire will be needed." The letter was signed with a single name, written in a bold, unfamiliar hand, Lord of Winterfell. Lyra looked up from the parchment. "Do you believe it?" He folded the letter, eyes distant. "The North is a land of truths others choose not to see. If they call, I must answer." She frowned. "The world fears us. Why go to those who would see us slain?" "Because the fire was not given to us for vengeance," he said softly. "It was given for balance. If darkness rises again, then fire must rise to meet it." For 3 days, the dragons flew restlessly, sensing their rider's intent. The sky above Dragonstone filled with stormlight, and the waves broke in thunderous rhythm against the cliffs. At dawn on the 4th day, Daenor and Lyra stood before Tempest and Silvermist. The air crackled with power. Around them, the younger dragons stirred, their wings stretching toward the dawn. "Once, our kin destroyed the realm," Lyra said. "Now we must save it." Daenor took her hand. "So it always begins, and so it must end." They mounted their dragons and rose into the gray morning. Below, the island watched them go, its fires burning bright in farewell. The storm followed them northward, a herald of the power that had returned to the world. And in the winds above the sea, as lightning danced around their wings, Daenor thought he heard a voice, faint, distant, older than time itself. It was not the voice of gods, nor ghosts, but of dragons. "We sleep, but we never die." He smiled. The fire burned within him brighter than ever. Ahead lay the frozen lands, and beyond them, whatever fate awaited both man and dragon. And thus began the next chapter in the long tale of fire, not the dance of death, but the flight of rebirth, when dragons once more ruled the sky, and the world, trembling, remembered its fear. The northern wind was cruel beyond imagining. It came down from the wall like a living thing, clawing at Daenor's face, lashing his cloak, biting even through the heat that rose from Tempest's flanks. The great dragon's wings beat the air with the strength of storms, each stroke scattering snow like torn feathers. Beside them, Silvermist glided upon the gray clouds, her scales shimmering faintly in the wan light, Lyra seated firm upon her back. Below them stretched the desolation of the north, endless white, the rivers frozen into veins of glass, forests bowed beneath their burden of ice. The world seemed lifeless, carved from frost. And yet, beneath that stillness, Daenor felt it, a pulse, faint but steady. The land itself was alive, vast and ancient, waiting for something. When at last they descended upon the walls of Winterfell, the guards who saw them screamed. No songs or tales had prepared them for such a sight. The dragons landed upon the frozen field beyond the gates, steam rising from their nostrils, melting the snow in a wide circle. The air itself seemed to shudder. Out from the great stone gate came riders cloaked in gray and white furs. At their head rode a man broad of shoulder, his face stern as carved oak. He dismounted and approached with slow, measured steps. "You are the dragon riders," he said. His voice was deep and cold. "I am Lord Cregan Stark, Warden of the North. You were summoned." Daenor inclined his head. "We received your raven. You spoke of darkness rising. Tell me what stirs in your land that fire might answer." Lord Cregan's gray eyes studied him. "Not all darkness burns, some freezes." He turned and gestured for them to follow. Within the great hall, torches burned low, their light soft upon the rough-hewn beams. Maps lay upon the table, stones marking the passes and valleys of the north. Cregan pointed toward the topmost edge of the parchment, where no road was drawn. "Beyond the wall, my rangers have seen shadows moving against the ice, men who do not bleed, creatures of cold that kill without sound. The old tales said they were dead, tales meant for children." Daenor frowned. "You speak of wights." "Aye," said the Lord, "and of the things that command them. Once before they walked, in the long night. The fire of dragons ended that age. If the flames have returned, perhaps the gods mean to test us again." Lyra's hand tightened upon Daenor's arm. "We have seen no such evil in the south." "The south is warm," Cregan replied. "The dead sleep best in the cold." They made ready to ride at dawn. The dragons would fly ahead, scouting the frozen plains beyond the wall. Cregan's men would follow on horseback. Before the sun rose, the gates opened, and the riders set out into a world of snow and silence. The wall loomed before them like a frozen mountain, vast and blinding in the moonlight. Its blue surface shimmered as though lit from within, and the wind that swept down from its heights was sharp enough to draw tears. When the gates of Castle Black swung open, the Night's Watch stood in solemn ranks, men clad in black, their faces hard from years without warmth. They had seen strange things that winter: lights upon the horizon, the sound of horns in the night. "Beyond lies only death," their commander warned. Daenor mounted Tempest. Then it is time death met fire again. They took to the sky. The land north of the wall was a graveyard of ice. Forests stood frozen, each branch encased in crystal. Rivers lay still beneath the snow, their beds glittering like mirrors. And in the far distance, Daenor saw it, a vast valley filled with mist, and within it, movement. At first he thought it the shifting of the storm. Then he saw shapes, hundreds, perhaps thousands, moving in slow, terrible unison. Pale figures, their eyes cold blue, their bodies half shrouded in frost. The dead. "They are countless," Lyra whispered through the wind. "They are waiting," Daenor said. When the wights looked up, the light of their eyes shimmered in eerie accord. A single figure stepped forward among them, tall, armored in ice, a crown of frost upon his head. He raised his blade, a sword clear as crystal, sharp as frozen death. The storm screamed. "Fly," Daenor shouted. Tempest surged upward as the valley erupted with motion. Below, the wights began to climb, scrambling up the slopes like ants. The crowned figure lifted his hand, and from it burst a wave of cold that struck the dragon mid-flight. The world turned white. Frost crept along Tempest's wings, stiffening the membranes, dulling the fire in her throat. Daenor felt the chill bite into his bones. He willed her upward, urging flame from her belly. With a roar, she answered, fire meeting ice in an explosion that split the clouds. The wave shattered, hurling shards of ice across the valley. Where the fire touched, the dead shrieked and fell, but the cold did not relent. Lyra circled above on Silver Mist, raining fire from her jaws, scattering the horde. "They will not stop," she cried. "Then neither can we." Together they dove, flames sweeping across the frozen plain. The fire burned blue in the cold, and the smell of death rose with the smoke. Yet for every wight they destroyed, 2 more climbed from the mist. The battle raged without end, and above it all, the crowned figure watched, unmoved. Daenor's strength waned. The storm thickened, snow and darkness entwining. Then, through the chaos, he felt it again, that ancient pulse, the heartbeat of the world. It came not from the mountain, but from within himself, and within the dragons. The fire was calling. "Lyra!" he shouted. "Together, now." They rose side by side, higher and higher, until the sky itself seemed to bow beneath their wings. The dragons roared as one, and from their throats burst twin streams of flame, spiraling, merging, forming a torrent of light so bright it seared the heavens. It struck the valley in a blaze of pure fire. The ice shattered. The mist screamed. The dead burned like shadows cast into the sun. When the fire died, silence fell. Only the wind moved. Daenor looked down upon the blackened valley, steam rising where once the whites had stood. The crowned figure was gone, melted into the earth. But even as he watched, the frost at the edges began to creep inward again. The cold would return, not today, but someday. He turned Tempest southward. Lyra followed close. Back at the wall, Cregan Stark stood waiting, his men silent behind him. When Daenor landed, steam rose from the dragon's nostrils and frost crackled along her scales. "You have seen what comes," Daenor said. The Lord nodded slowly. "Aye, and you have seen that it can be fought." "Only for a time," Daenor answered. "The fire must not fade again." Cregan clasped his arm. "Then let it burn, Dragon Rider. The North will remember." As they turned south once more, the wind eased, carrying with it a strange peace. The wall gleamed behind them, unbroken, and the stars burned bright above the frozen world. Daenor looked once toward the north, toward the endless dark, and whispered to the night, "Sleep for now. When you rise again, we will be waiting." And so the dragons flew homeward, their fire lighting the heavens, their wings scattering the snow like rain. Below, the land slept once more, but in its heart, deep beneath the ice, the cold whispered back, "Fire for now, but winter forever." Yet high above, the dragons sang, and the night was driven away. Their song echoed across the world, a promise against the dark, that so long as one flame lived, dawn would always return. When the dragons returned from the north, the sky above Dragonstone burned with twilight. The clouds glowed crimson, and the sea reflected their color as if the whole world were steeped in blood and fire. Daenor felt the warmth of Tempest's breath against his cheek as they descended, wings beating slow and heavy. He could still feel the echo of the cold in his bones, the memory of the dead staring up from the mist beyond the wall. They landed upon the cliffs, the wind whipping around them. Lyra followed close, guiding Silver Mist to ground. Her eyes, bright and fierce, sought his at once. "They will return," she said softly, her voice nearly lost to the wind. "You felt it too." "Aye." Daenor's gaze turned northward, though the horizon showed only darkness. Fire cannot destroy what was never truly alive, but it can delay it. We have bought the realm time, perhaps years, perhaps centuries. And when they come again, then those who bear the fire must rise again. The wind howled through the caverns below. The dragons roared in answer, their voices rolling like thunder. Denor looked upon them, Tempest, scarred and mighty, her eyes burning like twin suns, Silver Mist, graceful as dawn, and the younger brood, restless and wild, their scales gleaming in hues of copper and flame. For the first time in living memory, Dragonstone lived again. Its halls filled not with silence, but the deep, steady pulse of dragons. They made their home upon the cliffs and in the hollow of the mountain, repairing the old keeps, rebuilding the forges that had long since gone cold. Lyra commanded the dragons with the calm certainty of one born to it, while Denner labored beside her, shaping the stone with fire. Months passed. The realm watched from afar, torn between awe and fear. Ravens flew from every castle, from Storm's End, from Old Town, from the Eyrie, their messages bearing offers of alliance, of tribute, of truce. But Denor refused them all. No lord of this age understands what power truly is, he said to Lyra one night as they stood beside the sea. They see fire only as a weapon, not a burden. Lyra's eyes softened. And what do you see it as? He looked out toward the horizon, where the waves caught the last light of the sun. A promise, he said, that we are not yet finished. Their peace did not last. From the west came pirates seeking treasure. From the south came priests calling them abominations. From the east came men with blades, sent by a frightened king who could not bear the thought of dragons beyond his reach. The first attack came in the night, a fleet of black-sailed ships slipping through the fog. But Tempest awoke before they reached the shore. Her roar split the dawn, and her fire turned the mist to gold. When the smoke cleared, nothing remained but the hiss of waves and the drifting wreckage of ships. The second attack came weeks later, led by sellswords bearing banners of a dozen lords. Lyra led Silvermist against them, her hair streaming like fire as they soared through the clouds. The sky burned that day, and the men who lived to tell of it spoke of a storm made of wings. Afterward, Danner found her standing upon the battlements, her hands trembling. "They will never stop," she said. "Nor will we," he answered. Yet even as he spoke, a shadow crossed his heart. The realm was afraid, and fear, he knew, was the truest enemy. Fire could destroy armies, but fear could turn kingdoms against themselves. It was then that Denner conceived his final act. One night, when the moon was full and the wind calm, he summoned Lyra to the cliffs. The dragons slept in their caverns, their bodies glowing faintly with heat. Above, the stars shimmered, and the air smelled of salt and storm. "I have made my choice," he said. Lyra frowned. "What choice is that?" "To hide the fire once more." She stared at him as if struck. "You cannot mean it. After all we've fought for." "I do," he said quietly. "The world is not ready. If we remain, men will come again with swords and chains. They will not rest until they have turned dragons into weapons and riders into tyrants. Better the fire sleeps, waiting for an age that will not squander it." Her eyes glistened with tears. "You would bury the dragons?" "No, I would let them live, beyond reach, beyond fear." He looked to the sea, where the moon's reflection wavered upon the dark water. "There are caverns beneath the island, deeper than any man has ever walked. There, the flame can rest until it is called again." Lyra's voice broke. "And us?" Denor reached for her hand. "We will go with them. We are bound to them as they are bound to us. We will sleep, not die. The blood of dragons cannot perish. It can only wait." For a long while, she said nothing. Then, through her tears, she nodded. "If this is your will, then it is mine too." Together they descended into the mountain. through the tunnels that glowed with living fire. The dragons followed, one by one, until the caverns echoed with the beating of wings and the low hum of their breath. At the heart of the mountain stood a great chamber, its walls black glass, its floor cracked by streams of molten rock. The air shimmered with heat. There Denner raised his hands and spoke the old words his mother had taught him, words older than Valyria itself. The dragons bowed their heads, their eyes dimming to embers. The fire upon the walls grew brighter, wrapping the chamber in gold. "Sleep," Denner whispered. "Sleep until the world remembers its need." The dragons obeyed. One by one, they folded their wings and sank into stillness. The flames dimmed, leaving only the faint glow of their scales and the slow, steady rhythm of their hearts. Lyra stepped beside him. "Will they wake again?" "When the night grows too long," he said, "when the cold comes for the living." Then he took her hand, and together they stepped into the light. The fire closed around them, soft and warm, and the mountain grew quiet once more. Years passed, decades, centuries. The realm forgot. Kings ruled and fell. The Iron Throne changed hands, and the memory of dragons faded into legend. But sometimes, when the sky burned red at dusk, or the earth trembled beneath the sea, old men crossed themselves and whispered of Dragonstone. They said the island still breathed. They said the fire slept. And deep beneath its black cliffs, in the heart of the mountain, the dragons dreamed of flight, of flame, of sky, of a world that would one day call them home again. And among them, untouched by time, Denner and Lyra slept side by side, their hearts beating in time with the dragon's own, guardians of the flame, keepers of the promise, until the cold would rise once more and fire would answer. For this is the truth of the world: the dragons never die, they only wait.